Whenever you're ready. Yep.
Yeah. So Jake Corley, co-founder of Digital Wildcatters. So we're a media company focused on bringing together the energy tech community. This is not a great beer. It's kind of subpar, to be honest with you. I like blonde ales. I'm not like a super fan of this one, but I have a six pack of it, so I might as well drink it.
Yeah, perfect. Put to good use. I'm always concerned with the name of this show that people are going to think it's some beer review or beer blog thing. And, here I am. I mean, I have a decent beer right now, but drinking a Lone Star or Miller Lite, I will not shy away from that by any means. Like sometimes prefer to reach for them.
Okay.
So we can go chronologically through how you got started. Right after school, I saw on LinkedIn that you joined the Marines, and then the next job seemed like it was in oil and gas. Like, what was that transition like? What was your time in the Marines? Like, did somebody introduce you to that, or was it, did you grow up in Texas, so it was just natural?
No, trust me. If you saw some pictures of me, like around that age or younger, you would be like, you are gonna die in the Marine Corps. Like, I was like Captain America back when he was still like now. Steve Rogers. Yeah, I'm like 220 now, but that wasn't the case at all. Like in high school, I mean, I was probably freshman year, I was like 130. Even going into the Marine Corps, I was like 160, 165, I think, roughly, and so 6 feet tall. So I was like pretty much skin and bones. I did not take school seriously, like a lot of people. I graduated pretty early at 17, and my parents had supported me along the way through, a few semesters of college, and it was very clear from the very beginning that, hey, if you don't make at least D's, we're going to completely drop you. And so I had like a huge apartment to myself, and I had all this freedom, and I just.
Where'd you say you were at school?
I was going to Blinn, which is like the feeder to Texas A&M.
Yep.
And so that was the plan, was to get a Blinn and then transfer into A&M, and then do something. I don't remember what I wanted to do at that point. And so long story short, my parents dropped me. And so I had like a month to kind of figure out how I was going to, what I was going to do. I was working at Reynolds and Reynolds, which was they're like the largest, how do you describe them? They're like the largest manufacturer of computer systems, both hardware and software for car dealerships. So you go into any car dealership today, the way that they manage their keys is in like a locker, and then there's software along with that ties into like their inventory management systems. So I'd worked there for like 2 years building these crazy, essentially it was like a red box. It literally looked like a red box minus being red. It had a screen, but instead of DVDs, it would spit out keys to like Ferraris and Lambos and anything else that you wanted to put in there. And so I built those for a while. Cool. And so I had they're a huge firm. This is so it was actually Universal Computer Systems when I first started working there. Then they merged with Reynolds and Reynolds. So it was the two biggest companies merged together. Huge multi-billion-dollar corporations, one of the biggest employers in all of Bryan College Station. And so I could have gone full-time there, but I'd kind of seen that wasn't the life necessarily that I wanted. I didn't really have any clear guidance. And so I said, let's go see the world. But if I was going to do it, I was like, I'm going to go for the hardest one. I'm going to do the one that everybody says I can't do. So I was the easiest recruit. I walked right into the Marine Corps recruiting station. I didn't need to hear their pitch. I was just like, here's who I am, what can I do, and how fast can I leave? And they were like, oh, that's really, really easy. Okay, cool.
Like ship out, leave?
Yeah, ship out. So I shipped out from the time I walked in there to the time I shipped out was under 2 months, probably closer to about a month. Yeah, which is not the case anymore.
Or anything?
No. So you I just pretty much, I ended the lease on my apartment. I stayed with my dad for like 2 weeks and then left January of 2009. And so they put me into communications maintenance. And so, went to boot camp, went to comm school, and just essentially just did a lot of what I was already doing, working on hardware, but now I was on communication systems for trucks and tanks and man packs and stuff. And so just working on radios. That was pretty much it. So it was pretty boring. Yeah. I was out in California. I was in 29 Palms the first year, which is the middle of nowhere. It's actually where they send you if you're going to go deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan, because it's the closest climate that we have in the U.S. to that. And
I've never heard of it before.
Yeah, it's out in the middle. It's like you find Palm Springs and you go like an hour further out in the middle of nowhere, and there's 29 palms. So that's where I was at the first year. And then, so that was the worst duty station you could possibly get. And then I got the best duty station you could possibly get, which was Camp Pendleton, which is just south of LA, just north of San Diego. It's wonderful. And so I got to, ride motorcycles and drive through the mountains and go snowboarding and go to Blue Bear and go surfing. And there was just a lot of
life.
Dude, it was great. So all the time that I wasn't working, I was definitely playing super, super hard. So met my wife out there, got out in end of 2012, came back, decided I started working with a startup out of LA in like the real estate market. It was kind of my first exposure. Just a guy that I randomly met was just like, hey, do you want to like do this with me? And I was like, yeah, sure. So we did it for a few years. And so I actually came back, we all moved in together in like a startup house.
In Houston?
And then in Houston. So it was like, it was two of us and then one of them's brother. And then our other co-founder was in like Serbia. And so we did that for like the first probably 6 months that we came to Houston, and then it all kind of like fizzled out and we just kind of moved on to the next thing. But I was in school for computer science, and my wife moves into the startup house. Like that was like the first like 6 months or a year, however long of our relationship was her moving into the startup house.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny.
That's dedication.
Yeah. She deserves a medal for that.
Yeah.
And so I was in school for computer science. I think I was like 3 semesters in, and I ended up meeting a guy whose dad owned a exploration and production company, so an oil and gas company here in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a developer of over 20 years. I noticed him at the gym just because I noticed like what he drove up in. He always had like these nice exotic cars and stuff, and so I was curious what he did, and struck up a conversation. Long story short, he showed me what he'd been working on for his dad's company. So it was some software to manage production and accounting, variety of other tasks and stuff that you have to do for oil and gas companies. Long story short, I started kind of, doing coding twice a week with him as like, he was like a mentor. And then I think probably like 3 months in, I ended up quitting my job, dropped out of school, and we went and raised $500,000 and started the company.
Pretty good.
So, yeah.
How long did it take you to raise the money?
No clue. Luckily, he comes from a wealthy family, and so he went to his cousin, and his cousin just wrote us a check for $500,000. So,
nice.
That was pretty nice. That was the easiest fundraising I've ever had to do. Trust me, all the other times have been extremely hard. So we, worked on that from 2013 till 2016, and so
and that was all oil and gas focused.
Yeah,
back office.
I had zero experience in oil and gas. I didn't know anything. And so, having just dropped out of school, I went and bought a bunch of petroleum engineering textbooks and just read them, just like cover to cover. And then I just started talking to people. One of the really pivotal moments for me, I guess, in my career, kind of going to oil and gas, is since I didn't know anybody, I wanted to make sure that I could know a lot of people really quickly. And so I started, I found this meetup group on meetup.com called, it was an oil and gas entrepreneurs meetup group. And it was a small group, probably 40, 50 people showed up every single month, but there was like 650 members. They'd have people come and speak, and you would network and all that kind of stuff. And so I started volunteering for that and like helping organize and whatnot. And that really helped me kind of build my network from there, and then met a bunch of people, and then helped co-found the American Petroleum Institute's Young Professionals Group with 600 individuals, which once again was just really to help kind of like bolster my network up. So we did that for like another 2 years. And then till we realized that running a nonprofit was not fun. And so we shuttered that.
Not very profitable.
Yeah. And so, so I founded so after I left GDS in 2016, unfortunately my partner and I had a falling out and decided to start something very, very similar, just a little bit different flavor on it. And so worked on that for a number of years. And then 2000.
Were you by yourself, or did you have a partner in that?
I had a co-founder on the So the next company was called
Your
Wellhub.
second project.
And so I had 2 co-founders on that as well. And so those are people that I had met through just working on GDS and actually pitching them. And so one of them actually had worked at an oil and gas company. Actually, both of them did. And so we were working on that project for quite some time. Ultimately ended up shelving it. Just some other opportunities came up that was, too good to pass up. Started podcasting actually in 2016 on a show called Oil and Gas This Week. And so we had grown it. I didn't think I was asked to be on the show. It had launched probably 6 months prior.
As a host, or were you just like a
just hosting it? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And so there was one guy on there, and he asked me to come join him as a host. He needed a second host, and I was like, man, oil and gas is like a really niche thing for like people to like want to like listen to.
Absolutely.
And I was like, yeah, but sure. At the time, it was like I had just left my company. Didn't really have anything better to do, and so I was like, yeah.
And you had a bunch of contacts from reaching out to people and starting Young Professionals group, and
a bunch of contacts at that point. And so this was just a weekly news show, and so we were just taking news and breaking it down and providing some commentary on what was going on in the world that week in energy. And it did really well. So by the time that I left, probably about 6 months ago, I had done it from 2016 until 6 months ago. So we had done over 1 million downloads in that time period.
On oil and gas startup, or
on the Oil and Gas This Week.
Yeah.
Wow. So did pretty well.
That
was actually like a huge thing for me in terms of taking my network to the next level. It was really weird going to conferences and having people like recognize me, or like they would just hear my voice and then like recognize me.
Right.
And so that was like a really different thing. And that opened up opportunities to like speak at conferences and things like that. And so
did you do much of that at the time?
I did a little bit. Yeah. A couple different conferences here and there, some big, some small. It was always fun to kind of just chat with people.
I was going to ask if you liked it or not, because it's totally different, speaking to a huge crowd of people versus doing this or sitting in a recording studio.
It depends on like what the topic is.
Right.
Like me then in 2016, 2017, and me now, I'm much more confident. I could go on stage back then and be fine, but I think I'm much more confident now to really not prepare and just riff off the top of my head, depending on what the topic is. I think that just has to do with just being more comfortable kind of in your own skin, hearing your own voice, and just practice. Podcasting is an acquired skill. Speaking is an acquired skill. It's one of those things that just takes a lot of time to hone in. It's something that you're not necessarily born with. And I feel that way now we're doing a lot more like video content with Digital Wildcatters. I feel that way as I'm doing vlogs and things like that. Like it was really kind of weird in the beginning, especially when you're just like staring into a camera, talking to yourself. But it becomes more and more natural the more you do it.
I keep like seeing my hair flare up. I'm like, you have a hard time not looking at your image, especially like, that's another thing too about why this works for me is like, I'm already doing a handful of Zoom calls a day with clients or prospective clients. Everyone already has the application downloaded, but there's so many challenges that you don't even think about until you start doing it, where like, it seems easier to sit in your house with like shorts on and then like a nice shirt up top. But at the end of the day, you still have to focus. You can't like drift off. You almost have to focus more in a different manner and like trick your brain into, engaging like we're actually sitting across the table for you, which is sometimes challenging.
Yeah. I'm honestly like, I'm so ready for life to go back to somewhat normal, because meeting with people now is such like a big part of our life with podcasting and recording content, and I prefer all of our meetings to be in person. Yeah. Because then it's like you get like all of my attention, right?
Right. Yeah. 100%.
And it's more memorable that way too. Like I've had so many Zoom calls over kind of like all of 2020, I guess, since COVID hit. And there's some that it's like, I just cannot recall. Like I can recall the conversation. I just cannot recall who it's with because it's not in person.
Did y'all start off like building a studio for Digital Wildcatters whenever you moved into that? Were y'all like, go raise money, build a studio, have revenue, like,
zero money did we raise. We bought the equipment and we already had an office. And so we actually, at first we didn't even have a studio. Technically, we just had the recording equipment. And so we were recording out of conference rooms in different like co-working spaces. And so we started off like we were officed at, we were at Galleria here in Houston. We were like one of the first tenants there. And then we moved from there to Tech Space temporarily. And then we moved to the Cannon. Then we were at the Cannon for about a year.
Are y'all still there?
No, actually we built our own office in downtown now.
Oh, nice.
And so, yeah, so we built a studio in the Cannon office. And so it was really like our office / studio. We just had like a gigantic recording setup right in the center of the room.
Right.
It was essentially like a cleaning closet that they just turned into like an office that they wanted to lease out.
Nice.
And so they were like, yeah, like $600 a month. We were like, cool, we'll take it. So it was like the size of like a small bedroom. So we set up in there, and then we just.
I get emails from the Cannon every once in a while.
Oh yeah, they're great people, man. We had a lot of good time over there.
Yeah, and they're close to our office, like out towards the Beltway, right? Or west.
Yeah,
west.
they're off of Brentmore, like by Athena Gun Club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're over in between West Park and Richmond, and it's like that West Chase area, so right before Beltway. But I see that, and they always have like happy hours and mixers, and I was going to go to one, and then I was going to go to another one, and then I never went to one, and then here we are in COVID world where you can't do anything.
I know. We used to host one there while we were office there. We hosted one every single month for a year.
Really? That's probably one of the ones I got an invite to then.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Dude, man, you get to meet the community. It was like, I think that was like one of the most important things for us. It was, we had just launched the podcast. Actually, we started doing events, like live events and like parties and happy hours and stuff before we even started the podcast.
Were you charging for them, or was it just purely networking?
No, these were just completely free.
Right, yeah.
And so the intention wasn't to make money on them or anything. It was to throw a party and just see if we can pull it off. And so we, like I said, we were one of the first tenants that we were at Galleria. So it was like practically empty in there, and you had huge common area spaces. And so we got a couple kegs of beer, got a bunch of pizza. I think we threw down like $500-600. And the first one, we had like 200 to 300 people show up, and people were like blown away. They were like, this is different. Like, you guys are like dressed down, and there's rap music playing, and there's kegs of beer and pizza. And we totally forgot to buy plates. So it was like, it looked like a frat party. And so we did that a few times. And we're like, okay, well, this is pretty cool. And then it evolved into, we did one, we're like, well, how do we like make this valuable to where instead of everybody just getting shit-faced, how do you provide some extra value? And so we did one on energy tech funding. So we had a panel of venture capitalists and investors in the space. And once again, packed the room again, just a little bit different crowd. And so it was really interesting to see how we were able to bring everybody together there. And then that eventually evolved into a series that we did in the pre-COVID world, or once a quarter, we would get everybody together for what we call Energy Tech Night. And so same concept, still pizza, still beer. We did a couple at WeWork. We did one at St. Arnold's Brewery. Hundreds of people come out, and startups actually demo their technologies to an audience of investors or potential clients, things like that. And so it's been a fun series. We can't wait to get back to it. Just waiting for everybody to get back to kind of normal.
I know. That's probably, again, the reason I'm excited to be doing this. I really miss that aspect of, pre-COVID life, which is networking, meeting new people, sharing a beer, getting a coffee. There's still a little bit of that, but I found that linking up with people, there's a whole new, scenario thrown in besides just your time and my time and availability and like where we're going to meet. This is also good too, because if you're in Dallas, I can't drive up there and have a quick cocktail with you and then drive back and after. I mean, I could, but then as you get further, New York, Chicago, this makes it really easy to do. And then, maybe I'll do them live down the road, but this is fun for now.
Yeah. That's one of the challenges for us was it's still having as big of a pipeline and backlog of episodes recorded. We had like 4 months probably worth of content recorded when COVID hit. And so we just didn't record for a while and just kind of ran through the backlog. And then we've never done a single episode remote. And so we wanted to like try to keep it that way as much as we could. And so we're finally getting around to the point of thinking about doing some remotely with people, just because we would usually record when people are coming in town on business trips. They're already meeting with clients or meeting with investors and stuff. And so we're like, hey, while you're here, just come in and record. Nobody's traveling. And so we've got all these people in Calgary and London and New York and Pittsburgh and all over the place that are just not traveling for the foreseeable future. And so we're going to have to move to something more remote.
Yeah. So what point in time did y'all, I mean, were you making money at a previous job when y'all started, or like how were you, paying for your life and starting a hobby podcast?
I'm going to suggest nobody do what we did. We were doing a lot of things at once. So we were throwing a lot of shit at the wall, just kind of see what would stick. In 2000, what year was that? 2018, I think. So I left GDS for 2016. I started WellHub 2016, like the same week. I'd already put together the team. Rather than me going and getting like a super corporate job, I went back to what I was doing in college, which was personal training. And so I did that to allow myself to have the flexible schedule to work on WellHub as much as I was, as opposed to just taking like a 9 to 5. And so luckily my wife was working. And so we weren't rich, but we were making ends meet, and I was able to kind of pursue what I wanted to do. And so I did that until I got to the point where I could raise some more money. And so we just had to have the product to a certain spot, show some sort of traction first. And then in 2018, we started doing consulting accidentally. So we did the Energy Tech funding panel, and then we had a guy reach out, and he was just like, hey, we've got this technology, yada, yada, yada. We're international. We're not from the United States. We're looking to bring this to market in the oil and gas market, but none of these guys really knew the market. And so we kept having a few of these conversations come up with different potential clients. And we didn't necessarily want to do consulting. It was nothing we ever marketed ourselves for, nothing we ever wanted to pursue. Put a bid out there, or put a quote out there on the marketing for a lot more money than we thought they would ever say yes to, and then they accepted it.
Nice.
So
love when that works out. You're like, wow, should we have asked for more?
Yeah. So ended up being a terrible experience.
Really?
So consulting.
So what was the deal? They were trying to find you. They were having you link them up to a user of the software they had created, or trying to find someone for an entry point into like building out software for a company.
They'd already. So this wasn't even. This was like a hardware company, right? So they had actually made.
Oh, really?
They'd made pumps. That was the main client that we worked with was that, and they were based out of Switzerland. Had raised a ton of money. However, they just didn't have the subject matter expertise to really develop it for the oil and gas market. And so this was kind of like a last ditch effort to really save the company. And so we acted in the same capacity that you would engage with a McKinsey or a Bain or anything. And so we were just essentially management consultants. And so we went through all the materials that they had and just tore everything apart, did entirely new research, went out to the market and did in-person interviews. Not in-person interviews, personal interviews, I guess, with people to really get feedback on whether this technology would be applicable, and if so, where. And so we talked to hundreds of people during this time of the engagement to really figure out, does it fit? And if it does fit, where does it fit? Yeah. And so then we came back and redevised their entire strategy, how to go to market, how to commercialize it, things like that. So it was just a really, like, I wouldn't say necessarily consulting is bad. It was just like a really, interesting client that we had to work for, and there was a lot of challenges, and then I think a lot of maybe cultural barriers that we had to work through a little bit.
Sure,
working with people even that are people that live in Europe, they're just different. They do business differently. It's not that they're necessarily like if you're just sitting there chatting with them, that is different. But the way that they do business is completely different than how we do business in the U.S. and very different than how we do business in oil and gas. So it was especially trying. So we did that for a while. That actually paid the bills so we can go out and pursue a lot of other things. We also ended up buying wells in 2018. So we had some oil wells that we were operating up in Oklahoma, which is
and this is all under Digital Wildcatters.
No, this is this is completely separate from Digital Wildcatters.
Yeah.
So we started the podcast. We started Digital Wildcatters in back then it was just literally just the oil and gas startups podcast. And so Digital Wildcatters was similar to how you said your dad just bought the domain for Beerionaire. We had just bought the domain for Digital Wildcatters before. We had never used it.
Sure.
And so we started oil and gas startups podcast. We had a few of our friends on. They were like, "Hey, what's the format?" And we were like, "We don't know. We don't have any questions. We don't know how to do this." And so it just blew up kind of organically from there. And then I would say less than 6 months in, we had an acquisition offer from a firm in town to bring us on as partners.
Like a media company, essentially, or like a radio show?
Research company, actually. And so you can think about they were providing market intelligence to the same industry. And so same end users and kind of same subject matter, I guess you could say. And so we went through the kind of the rigmarole of potentially being acquired, and there's a lot of legal questions coming up of what is our intellectual property as human beings versus intellectual property of the show and things like that. And long story short, we ended up not doing it. It just wasn't a fit for us. And so, but through that, it opened our eyes to, hey, I think we probably have something we should look at here. Like if we have one offer, there's going to be more probably later. And so that's when
people are watching, somebody found it, thought it was really good idea, great show. And, was intrigued enough to throw some money at it.
Yeah. So we, so that's when we actually made it like a legal entity. So we incorporated as Digital Wildcatters, with the Oil and Gas Startups podcast being one of the assets underneath that. So
nice. I'd ask you who was it, but I don't, want to reveal your sources. Did it come from a bank though? Was it being like chopped through a bank? Or did they reach out personally?
No, surprisingly not. No, I had known one of the guys since they had started since the beginning. I knew who his partner was at the time, but they had scaled their firm to, I think at the time we were talking about the acquisition, probably like 30 people or so. And so they needed some help on one end, and they thought that we could slide in there, and it sounded like a great idea until we kind of got in the weeds. And there's a lot of things to consider there. It's like, it's not just necessarily what are you going to make monetarily, but it's also, as a founder, I looked at what is my day-to-day going to be, and then how long am I going to be married to this post acquisition? Because usually, most of the time, it's an acqui-hire. So they acquire you, and then you're retained for 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, usually at a great salary. But
it's your body, really. Like you were talking about intellectual capital, like what is that? Okay, the guests are one thing and who you can pull to get on the show, but at the end of the day, it's y'all two running the show. And without y'all, is it the same show anymore? Not really. So how long are you handcuffed to a contract that you might not want to be handcuffed to?
Exactly. And so I'd like to think back to my time in the Marines. There's a lot of great things. Some of the best memories I ever have were during that time, but also like during working hours was probably the worst thing for me, just being like, I'm just entrepreneurial through and through. And so having somebody come in and tell me what to do all day, every day is not ideal. And so for that reason and a lot of other reasons, it wasn't a fit. I just didn't have peace about the decision. So we loved what we were doing. So we're like, let's keep doing it. So that was, that was in early 2019. And so now it's coming up on the end of 2020. So a lot of things have changed since then, but all for the better.
Yeah. You were talking about it earlier, but I'm still curious what, because I'm kind of going through it, or I am going through it right now. The reach outs, right? As not having an established show or podcast or whatever you want to call this. Like, hey, this is what I'm doing. And then trying to convince people who maybe haven't done one before, where I find like, if you've been on one before, it's a little easier to convince someone to do it. And if you have some examples, that's easier too. But like transition from cold reach outs? Like, you mentioned they started coming back to you recently. Is that from, I mean, you already talked through it, right? But people listening and reaching back out to you, or like, what was your, I'm rambling, but you know where I'm going with this. I'll rephrase that.
Here would be my advice, right? So you're reaching out,
how
the
do
early
you
stage.
get from reach outs to, acquisition, or, I mean, I don't expect people to be reaching out to me, but reach out to conversion of a podcast guest, I guess, would be a good question. Like, that is the biggest struggle right now.
I think recording content is 20% of the equation. Mm-hmm. Distribution of content is 80% of the equation. Mm. And so what we were able to leverage very early on, which I would highly suggest you do the same thing, is we were able to leverage LinkedIn. It's where a lot of people's attention is not divided amongst other things. Right. We think the listener acquisition, subscriber acquisition is very, very low and easily organic. Mm-hmm. Whenever I have a guest on now, it's almost like a rite of passage in the energy tech community. It's like, oh, you haven't been on the show. Like, what's wrong with you? Right. And so whenever our guest would come on the show, you make it an experience for them. You get a lot of pictures out of it. We create some micro content. Now we do it on video too, so they can share that. So they naturally want to share it with their connections, their friends, their family. Yeah, look how cool this experience was. We create some marketing materials for them usually. We haven't done as much lately because now it's just kind of grown organically. But especially in the beginning, we would create little clips, like micro clips of just certain quotes, right? So it would just play like 15 seconds of the podcast and then make it easily shareable. And so they would start sharing these things to their networks on LinkedIn. And then the network effect just kind of took place because we're coming in on like 100 episodes now. And so if you do that enough times and people just keep resharing, it just kind of grown organically. We've never put $1 behind anything paid, just because we don't necessarily have a product that we're trying to
What do you mean by that? $1
like you can easily go out like Facebook ads, Google AdWords, LinkedIn ads, anything like that. It's been 100% organic up to this point. Got it. That's going to change soon. And we'll see how quickly we can grow the audience from there. But everything's been organic to this point. So I think it's just reaching out and saying like, hey, like I find you interesting. I think you would have a great story to tell, and I think our listeners would really appreciate it. Yeah, and it's a way to, especially with your angle, it's a way to like give back to the community. That's a big part of what we do at Wildcatters. Everybody thinks that it's just like a podcast, but there's a lot of things that we're working on that very much do not look like a podcast or things that a media company would be doing. But it's very, very hands-on with the startup community. Because we want to see, for one, I want to see the energy industry look like Silicon Valley. And we've done a really good job of helping facilitate that. In order to do that, you need the smartest people building the best technologies. And that's going to lead to a much more fun and sustainable industry because the industry is kind of facing a lot of existential crises currently. And so there's a lot of things that need to change. Yeah, I don't know. I was rambling, but
I like that. I like where you're going to, and a follow on to that or a tack on would be the industry. At least from my observation, growing up in Houston, I always tell people like, if you think you're not in the energy industry and you live in Texas or Houston specifically, you're wrong. If you're a dentist, you're actually in the energy industry because all your clients are probably in the energy industry. So it's all some sort of connected to that industry. But by being able to observe it and be on the peripheral, you can tell that like, from IT, technologically advanced like industry, they're still lagging, and there's so much money that it wouldn't be a hard jump to get there. But there's a lot of room for tech to, I guess, disrupt, if you want to call it that. But it'd really be an improvement on processes or whatever,
Yeah, I mean, to kind of get off my high horse for a second to talk about geopolitics. The domestic oil and gas industry is by far not the lowest cost producer. So what I mean is that it's more expensive for us to produce oil and gas than it is Russia or Saudi Arabia. Okay. Sure. And then we do not participate in OPEC, which is the cartel, which essentially is fixing pricing globally based on by limiting or unlimiting, depending on how you look at it, production. And so since we don't participate in that, they always want to try to hurt us. There was a pricing war very early on this year. in conjunction with COVID-19 that led to, for the first time ever in history, the market showed negative pricing. So the barrel of oil went down to negative $37, which means storage capacity was spoken for. Mm-hmm. And so there's so many other issues, including like the business model of shale oil and gas, which is anything unconventional. So traditional wells are vertical. Unconventional wells have gigantic horizontal laterals. And that is not sustainable by any means. And that's a bulk of the drilling that we've been doing. And so in order to really change the industry, we have to lower the cost it takes to drill and produce wells significantly. And the only way you're going to do it is with technology, not just software, but also hardware. And so that's a big thing for us. And it should be more and more important to Americans. And I think it is to a lot, but I think there's energy as a whole. It seems like there's these two camps of like, you can only be an oil and gas, like pro oil and gas, or you can only be pro renewables and clean tech. But really, like for us, especially with where we're going, like we're very pro energy in general. And each one of them kind of has their own place. And each one has its own level of maturity. And you have to understand that the amount of products that are generated from petroleum is staggering, and there is no suitable replacement for that. There are certain use cases that we can offload to windmills and solar farms and battery technology and things like that. But for producing chemicals and rubbers and plastics and things like that, there's nothing else that's readily available on the market today at the same cost, with petroleum being cheaper than any of the synthetic replacements. And so petroleum is such a big part of why we are a first world country. First world countries have one common denominator, and it's abundance of hydrocarbons.
That is true, actually, to think about it. But so that, throwing COVID into the mix was, gasoline on a brush fire that was already there. Has it been affecting, y'all, aside from at the beginning struggling to get people to come into the office or not wanting them to, however you want to put it? But
other than that, actually, it's been great for us.
Yeah.
And I hate to say that, but whenever you build up a really large audience and that's highly engaged with oil and gas professionals, and then all of a sudden, every single oil and gas conference disappears. Every single professional organization. And so for oil and gas, it's Society of Petroleum Engineers, it's Society of Geologists. They all have their own little technical events they do all the time, and happy hours and stuff. Mm-hmm. All of those disappeared. And so there was a period where for us, now that we've monetized through advertising and a variety of other avenues, that dried up temporarily. And then people quickly bounced back once oil came back to, $41 a barrel.
Mm-hmm. So you have people dropping off your, as sponsors at the beginning?
No, so nobody actually dropped off, believe it or not. So everybody fulfilled their commitments. But now, since then, people have realized that there's no place to put marketing dollars.
Right.
And if you're the CMO or a director of marketing, the way marketing budgets work is if you have a $1 million budget for 2020 and you don't spend $1 million in 2021, you're going to get a $500,000 budget. So you have to spend the money and you have nowhere to put it. And
my internet just shorted out. Hold on. We're back. I'm going to get another beer actually really quick. Hold on.
Yeah, same here.
Okay. Yeah, that's one challenge of doing the Zooms. Like they're, even here at my house where I have pretty decent internet, it goes out every once in a while, like right in the middle of something really good. Or for example, the last one that I did was with my buddy who started Kirby Ice House. We had an awesome conversation because they're totally shut down, like really being, and I look up at the end and there was some glitch halfway through and it wasn't recording. Lost that.
Dude, it's you're earning your stripes, man. I've had that happen so many times. We have an issue now. So we built out a floor in downtown Houston, and it sounded like a good idea at the time, but we didn't realize that like not very far away is a gigantic AM radio tower. Mm-hmm. And those AM radio tower waves are like the same height as our floor. And so we were recording, via XLR to a Zoom and started picking up radio waves as soon as we moved in.
Like
the microphone cables, like the legit microphone cables. And so we eventually had to switch everything over to USB because the USB cables weren't picking up, and USB mics weren't picking up the radio signals. We were picking up Tejano music, jazz music, rap music, you name it. Yeah, like I'm telling you, it was
in the middle of your podcast.
In the middle of the podcast, yeah, it would come through the headphones, it come through the recorder. Yeah, it was crazy.
I'm sure that was pretty unique for your guests.
Yeah. They were like, "What is this?" It was like really distracting, especially when like it would come in waves where you get really loud and you just can't hear anything. So
yeah,
we actually did away with the headphones altogether. We did away with the XLR mics, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, headphones. Like, do you have a tech monitoring any of that, or like a assistant, or is it just y'all two typically?
Not yet. It's just us right now. But that's one of the things that we're working on getting locked down. Somebody can come in and handle all camera issues, all audio issues, you name it, just be able to handle everything. Because we had so we do the podcast and video now, and we do it with like 3 different cameras, and so you've got to sync up the audio, sync up all the angles and stuff. And we found out the issue, but it came out, turns out my my SD card reader was just jacked up, and so it was actually corrupting the cards. I thought it was the camera, but I lost like 4 whole episodes.
Really?
Yeah.
Like you could hear the audio, but the visual wasn't coming out, or just
corrupted the files.
Wow.
Yeah.
And your other one's on there? I mean, it
wouldn't corrupt, like, so since we shot in 3 angles, it wouldn't corrupt all 3 angles. It would corrupt 1 angle.
Yeah.
And so you would have
you staring into this camera.
One entire person is like missing. So
yeah. See, that's something that I'm thinking about too. Once wherever this goes, I'm not in any rush or trying to like go viral or whatever. Posting on LinkedIn, posting short clips on Instagram because I have the infrastructure there already. But I think it'd be cool to do this live in a bar, which I know has a ton of other issues to come along with it. But like the videotaping aspect, and then like I'm good at editing. I can edit all day. It's not that hard to plug something into iMovie or whatever software you want to do. It's like using a computer. If you know how to use one, you can pretty much do it. But like the technical piece, like for example, me not clicking record on Zoom or whatever is like, daunting, I guess. But
I would say one thing that does help, like, because Colin's done some episodes without me. I've done some without him. At least for us, like it's a little hard. It's a little hard sometimes, especially when you're like used to them kind of like chiming in for commentary and stuff, and then you do it without them.
Yeah,
it can be pretty challenging. And so I think it's easy. Like with a lot of the new shows that we launch them all with 2 hosts, so that you have like different
dead air.
You have
build.
Yeah, you've got like you got the commentary between the guys. You've got the their kind of chemistry there, so it helps.
Yeah, that's a good model.
So it's not like 100% reliant on just you, especially if you have like those off days. Like I have certain days where I'm swamped all day, and then I do a podcast recording, and I just cannot take my mind off of whatever I was working on. And so it's something that I'm actively trying to like be better at, and just like press the reset button going into an episode. But it's challenging, and that's another thing too. Like it's very, very hard in a day's work to go from dealing with all of our back end stuff and like business development mode and thinking about growing Wildcatters as a business, and then flip a switch and then go into like content production mode, like 2 completely different sides of your brain. It's very, very hard. And so I've started to try to break those up on different days, have entire days that are just creative days, have entire days that are just completely focused on the business side of things.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and trying to prep for a conversation with whoever your guest is too, right? Like going through their background, making sure you have some questions organized before, which like.
So we actually, I don't know if I would suggest this for anybody, but our model has been like, we don't ask, like I don't look up anything other than I look up just enough to see if it's going to be a good fit for the show.
Yeah.
And so I'll do a first call with somebody, and then they'll like want to tell me, and I'm like, shut up. Don't tell me anything else.
Yeah.
I want all my questions
Please
to be authentic.
don't waste my conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, hey, listen, like it's super easy. So we literally have no questions written down.
Yeah.
So we sit down and we introduce them, we ask them what they do, and then we just take the conversation from there. So usually we start off like high level, and then we'll go into like the big part of the focus is like the journey. And so we'll talk about like, where did they start? How did they come up with the idea? How did they build the team? Did they get funding? Did they not? What challenges do they have? Bringing the product to market, things like that. And then up into what are they doing now? And then where are they going? And so that's
right.
Kind of like loosely the format that we follow, but
yeah,
no questions, no background. It all just comes out organically and up into this point. That seems really, really ill prepared, but it's worked out really well for us, surprisingly. So
I'm really glad you said it, actually, because I talked to someone the other day who was like, maybe you should like send some questions beforehand because it's really hard to talk about what you do like off the cuff. And I'm like, no, I don't think I'm going to do that.
Authenticity sells. Like, that is at the core of what Digital Wildcatters is. Authenticity is there. And so it's like the same way as like, I don't know, like the Joe Rogan podcast. Like, it's just conversations. And by doing so, you humanize the companies, right? You put a face to their efforts. You hear their stories. You connect with them. Now it's not just a company anymore. It's the person behind the company.
Right.
And doing it in a way that's not scripted. Like, millennials, our generation and any generation after us, they're going to sniff out the bullshit. And from what we've seen, there's a need for this content of just being like as raw as possible. Like, raw in like raw meaning authentic,
business
not
refined.
Raw as in like, yeah. Like you can watch a lot of content like in the energy industry with some of the big legacy media companies that have been around for like 20, 30 years. And it's like very scripted, right?
Yeah,
it's like they've prepared for these questions. It's like politicians on whenever they're doing debates, it's like they're very, very polished and they're in suits and ties and stuff. And that's just never been us, and I think a big part of it was we were just playing to who we were as people. I think a big part of that comes from my Marine Corps background and just who I am. And then Colin comes from the field, as a roughneck, and just played into who we were. And I would suggest, like, if I know somebody that's like really, really normally just very, very polished, my suggestion to them was be yourself 100%. Don't try to be raw and unscripted if that's not you. Right. But
yeah, I definitely lean towards, like I said, I looked at your LinkedIn to see like where you had worked. So I kind of knew what questions I wanted to ask you, or like ask you about the Marine Corps. I wouldn't have known that if I didn't look that up.
Yep.
But having a conversation before, I don't even think I would be a good, host at that point in time, because I have a hard time asking questions that I already know the answers to. If I'm not genuinely curious about what I'm asking, then I actually tried that halfway through and I like stumbled and rambled for about 5 minutes and had to bail on that question.
You know what? But that's the wonderful thing about it, man. You can always edit it.
Yeah. 100%.
That's the way that we see it. Like, we do pretty minimal editing now, but I will say in the beginning, there was times where we chop some things out.
Yeah, you're like, ooh, that was kind of cringe-worthy. I don't think people need to hear that. I'm going to slice that out.
But I think also at the same time, we've left in a whole bunch of cringe-worthy stuff too, to where it's like, it becomes like inside jokes with the audience.
Sure. Yeah, well, and like at the end of the day, like how many people are really listening to, well, you now probably the majority of individuals are listening to the full episode. But for me, like putting out 35 to 45 minute video, someone's probably gonna listen to the first 5 minutes, maybe 15, and it's gonna be about 10 people, and then they're gonna log off. Those short little clips like you're mentioning, post on Instagram or LinkedIn, get way more views, and they can be curated to whatever I want them to be.
Yep. Hey, but man, Rome wasn't built in a day, so you just got to build it brick by brick. Yeah,
not trying to do anything crazy here, but this is fun just as it is, So I appreciate your time. I do prepare questions at the end, just like some closing questions. I have a couple of them.
Lightning round, let's go.
Yeah. If you were stuck on an island and had to bring beer or liquor with you the rest of your life with, no rescue in sight, which one would it be?
Oh, that's really tough.
You don't have to choose a liquor or a beer, but just maybe like
it'd be beer. It'd be beer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just because I think beer is refreshing, and I very rarely ever drink liquor. Because when I do, things get a little bit too out of hand.
And on an island, it's hot.
Yeah.
You get dehydrated.
It's a funny story. I've been banned from drinking at any of my wife's family's family events.
Really?
Particularly weddings.
Beer and liquor? Just generally.
Yeah, drinking in general. Yeah. So my wife is one of 9 through not all the same parents. They've both sides divorced, remarried, and brought new kids into the family. So
huge family.
Her brother got married last year, and I was supposed to be on baby duty because my son was only like a month old at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And come to find out, man, the grandparents just wanted to watch them. And so there was these gigantic, so there's a normal size bottle of champagne, right? And there's like the gigantic bottles of champagne. Well, they had like 2 of those like on every table, and nobody was drinking them. And it was like the best champagne. And so I started drinking it, and then I started grabbing bottles and just pouring everybody else glasses. I think I ended up drinking like 6 of these bottles myself. And there's like wedding photos of like me pouring it down like the bride's mouth and the groom and everybody else at the party.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, it was a good time. I blacked out about 3 p.m. On a bench. It was like an outdoor wedding, but yeah, can't.
Well, the pictures leading up to that are priceless, and that's what matters,
The way that I see it, I was like, I made your wedding fun. Okay.
Right.
It was about 105 degrees outside. You had like old people passing out. And so I brought a little bit of comedic relief to the wedding. That's the way I see it.
What's your favorite part about the oil and gas industry?
I love that it's ass backwards, because that means opportunity. It's the land of opportunity for us. We complain about a lot of things in the industry, but that's the whole reason that we do what we do. Is because we want to see things get better. We want to make it a place that's fun to work. We believe there's a lot of really great people in the industry. We want to attract more people to the industry. It's a lot of great people and a lot of opportunity to just be better at what we do.
Yep. It really, it is a good industry. I didn't talk about it, but just for your own, knowledge, insurance, but the majority of my clients, again, being in Houston, are oil and gas, and I'd say energy, right? Because we have renewable clients, full value chain services, upstream, midstream, downstream.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And I'm not smart enough to be in it actually, but I'll be on the peripheral all day. It's fun to work with everyone and shoot guns, go fishing, golfing. There's the finance side, there's the field side, and then I would consider you oil and gas as well. There's the tech side. Cool industry, good people. What did you find most challenging in starting, an entrepreneurial pursuit like Digital Wildcatters? Getting from A to Z, what was the most challenging aspect?
I think, this might be a roundabout way to answer it, but I think a few years ago, I was kind of on this kick of, entrepreneurship is for everybody. And that's not the case. It's really hard. Like really hard. And so when I'm talking to people, and this happens every single week, people who listen to the show and they're kind of inspired by listening to a bunch of people that we have on the show, and they want to go out and do their own thing, and they want to get feedback. I tell everybody, trust me, I think if it's really, 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 really what you want to do, I think you can be anything in this world that you want to do, as long as you have enough passion, you're willing to work hard enough and long enough at it. And I think I'm proof of that. But at the same time, you got to realize you're going to go through a lot of hard shit for a long time. And so my entrepreneurial journey started almost a decade ago. And I feel like we just started to kind of catch some traction with some things probably in the last 3 years. So it's a lot of nights, a lot of weekends. It's a lot of missed birthdays. It's a lot of missed Christmases. It's never turning off my brain. It's not what you see on Instagram with, people who are, going to the beach and, living their best life and stuff. Because the way that I see it, every single minute of every single day, somebody else is out there working hard to try to knock me off. And I don't know if that's my gift or my curse, but I can't let that happen. And that takes its toll on you. It really does. Like,
no doubt.
It's one of those things where, man, I shit you not, I have not taken a vacation with just my wife, like to go somewhere outside of like a day trip since we got married 7 years ago for a honeymoon. So we'll take like family trips, like with her family or my family, we'll do something like that. But in terms of like us just taking a vacation to like get away, and most of those family trips are like weddings, funerals, things like that. Mm-hmm. Could I take the time off? Absolutely, I could. But the problem is that I don't have the clear like headspace. Like I'm so far, like I'm closer to where I want to be, but in my mind, I'm so far because as soon as I get close, I raise the bar. And I raise the bar again. And so you just got to really know like what it takes. Like there's no like overnight successes on anything that's like actually worth it. And so it just depends on what your ambition is. My ambition is very, very out there, I guess. And so I'm trying to seek something that not many people have. I'm trying to create a life that not many people have. In order to do that, I have to do what no one has done. And so I don't know if that's like the best answer or not, but that's like the most real way that I can kind of describe it is like, you got to be damn sure that this is for you. Like entrepreneurship for me is like air. It's like, because I cannot do anything else. Mm-hmm. I can't just go get a job. I die inside.
Yeah. You can't clock into the 9 to 5.
I can't. And
especially after you've been doing it for so long, it's like 100% of the time on, do whatever I want, whenever I want, but it all is like your business and your pursuit, right? So it's very rewarding whenever you start to see success or don't, right? I mean, it's like, with anything, you have periods of ups and downs, and the downs suck, but then like right as you get back to the top, that high is very nice.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I mean, I went and did personal training again. So after like seeing some success, I left that willingly due to a falling out with my partner, went back to put my ego aside, everything, went back to just doing some personal training to pay the bills in order to see what I wanted to build come to fruition. Yeah. I had multiple job offers making more money than I'd ever made in my life to go work at other tech companies in the energy industry that I turned down so that I could focus on building my own thing. Like, and that's a great way to sum up what entrepreneurship is. It's waking up in the morning, getting punched in the mouth repeatedly, but somehow enjoying every second of it.
Yeah. Well, I think, after hearing your spiel and talk about your journey and your company, the energy industry is super niche, but you have a very captive audience, right? And if you can, capture 85% of the industry when you type in oil and gas podcast, best oil and gas podcast only, maybe there's like 10 of them, I don't know, but you're probably in the top 3 of that list. I mean, done something right. It's a really good industry. It's great people, and you're in Texas too. So again, it's hard to avoid it. But all right, last question, then I'll let you go. Appreciate your time again. What do you miss most about pre-COVID life?
Parties, man. We like I don't do much in my personal life. I don't really ever like go out or anything. I'll have people come over to the house or whatever, but I don't really have any time to do that. And so, kind of baking in parties into what we do, since that's kind of where we came from, start off as just like happy hours and stuff. And so getting out there, and we were counting the days to when we can host another event. I just love connecting with people, so as soon as we can do that again, that's going to be the absolute first thing that we can do. Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate your time, dude.
Yeah, man. Anytime you got any questions, just feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd also just like to come see y'all's studio at some point in time. Yeah. I mean, I'm
Absolutely.
traveling this week and the next week, but a couple months, I'll reach out to you and see if you're around.
Yeah, just shoot me a text. We'll make it happen.
All right, man.
Cool.
Cheers.
All right, man. Take it easy, bud.
See ya.